A man who has not suffered is not a man. Army of Shadows was not just a wartime thriller. It was a bleak mirror held up to the soul of resistance. It wasn't patriotism. It was paranoia. It wasn't heroism. It was sacrifice in slow motion. On set, actors collapse from cold. Scenes vanish because cameras jam. Melville rejects studio notes with icy silence. Today we dive into 15 weird facts about Army of Shadows. Stories of danger, cruelty, censorship, and survival. Fact number 15. The film is shot like a ghost story because Melville refuses natural light. Army of Shadows looks cold, drained, and haunted because Jean-Pierre Melville bans natural sunlight from nearly every interior scene. He insists the film must feel like memory, not reality. Not brightness, but bruises. Not sunlight, but the shadow of occupation itself. Cinematographer Pierre Lhomme recalls that Melville orders windows covered, sealed, and suffocated until only harsh artificial pools of light remain. The result is a suffocating atmosphere. Rooms appear lifeless. Hallways feel like tombs. Even the resistance looks spectral. What audiences never notice is how brutal this choice becomes for the cast. Actors stumble through long takes, barely seeing marks on the floor. Makeup departments scramble because every wrinkle is magnified under controlled lighting. It isn't style. It is psychological warfare through cinematography, and it sets the tone for every betrayal that follows. Fact number 14. Lino Ventura's performance is shaped by real injury on set. Lino Ventura does not simply play a hunted man. He becomes one. During production, he suffers a serious leg injury after slipping on a frozen exterior location. The winter shoot is unforgiving. The crew works through biting winds that rip through costumes. Instead of halting production, Melville adjusts blocking to incorporate Ventura's sudden limp. Not weakness, but weight. Not accident, but authenticity. The injury transforms his performance. Ventura moves with heaviness that mirrors the moral burden of his character. Co-stars reveal that between takes, he sits silently gripping his chair trying to hide the pain so the atmosphere of resistance fragility is never broken. What audiences think is pure acting is in fact a real man fighting his own body. Melville keeps the cameras rolling because he believes the resistance would carry wounds they never discuss. Ventura's injury becomes the emotional backbone of the film's final act. Fact number 13. The opening raid almost burns down the set. The first major action sequence hinges on a German raid staged with practical fire and timed explosions, but the special effects team miscalculates the ignition speed of one fuel line. The flames erupt too quickly, climbing walls faster than expected. Cast members sprint out of frame as grips rush in with extinguishers. It is not choreography. It is chaos. Melville refuses CGI or controlled studio flames. He wants realism. Smoke, heat, fear that rattles bone. As a result, the crew works in suffocating thick air that triggers coughing fits between takes. One assistant director reportedly passes out during the reset. What audiences see as gritty authenticity is actually a narrowly avoided disaster. And yet Melville keeps the take because the panic feels real. The scene's intensity becomes one of the most visceral portrayals of occupation-era dread ever captured on film. Fact number 12. Melville rewrites dialogue daily to match the mood of the set. Scripts anchor most productions. Not this one. Melville tears pages out of his screenplay on the morning of shooting, replacing them with whispered rewrites typed hours earlier. Not consistency, but instinct. Not order, but emotional calibration. Actors arrive on set only to find entire conversations missing, replaced by silences, gestures, and coded exchanges. Melville believes the resistance communicated with glances and half-finished thoughts, so the script must unspool like a secret. This choice rattles the cast. Some scenes require 10 or 12 takes because new lines are learned under crushing time pressure. But the psychological result is extraordinary. Uncertainty blooms on camera. Distrust pulses between characters who cannot predict each other's words. What audiences interpret as masterful, subtle acting is actually real tension created by a director obsessed with mood over predictability. Melville wants the film to feel like history, remembering itself, not dialogue recited from a page. Fact number 11. The prison camp scenes are shot in a real abandoned facility with freezing conditions. The prison sequences feel brutally authentic because they are. Melville refuses studio replicas and instead films in an abandoned military detention facility outside Lyon. The cells are damp. The floors freeze overnight. Breath fogs the air in thick clouds. Actors huddle in heavy coats between takes, but when cameras roll, they must remove them, leaving only thin costumes against the chill. Several background performers develop mild hypothermia. One production assistant reportedly loses sensation in his hands for days. Not realism, but cruelty, some critics argue. But Melville insists the resistance lived with cold as constant companion. Comfort would be dishonest. The eerie echoes, the icy walls, the claustrophobic corridors, all of it intensifies the sense of moral decay. What audiences feel as slow dread is born from the physical misery of the set itself. Every shiver in the film is real. Every sigh shapes the story's bleak heartbeat. Fact number 10. The execution scene shakes the cast so badly that filming stops for hours. The basement execution is one of the most disturbing sequences Melville ever films. What audiences do not know is that the emotional fallout behind the scenes is just as intense. The cast rehearses the scene only once. Melville bans additional walkthroughs to preserve raw shock. When the camera rolls, the silence becomes oppressive. You can feel breath tighten. You can feel dread thicken. During the take, one actor breaks down shaking uncontrollably after the final gunshot effect detonates louder than expected in the enclosed space. The sound ricochets like a real execution. Production halts for nearly 3 hours as the crew regroups. Some sit in stunned silence. Others step outside to breathe cold air. And here comes the mid-roll hook. Go ahead and like and subscribe because the deeper we go, the darker these stories become. And the next fact pushes the limits of filmmaking discipline. Melville keeps the real reaction, and the scene becomes one of the most psychologically harrowing moments in French cinema. Fact number 9. The underwater escape scene nearly drowns a crew member. The film's brief but haunting underwater escape sequence looks calm on screen, but behind the scenes, everything unravels. The production shoots in a freezing reservoir tethered with ropes and weighted platforms. Visibility is terrible. Communication is worse. During one reset, a crew diver gets his foot caught under a submerged metal frame. He panics as his oxygen regulator floods with icy water. Another diver notices bubbles rising erratically and dives to free him seconds before he passes out. Melville refuses to soften the realism. He wants actors submerged long enough for fear to imprint on their expressions. Not comfort, but confrontation. Not illusion, but lived danger. The near-drowning event forces the crew to redesign safety protocols overnight. Still, the director pushes boundaries. What audiences see as a somber, quiet moment of resistance ingenuity is actually a sequence born out of near catastrophe. The cold, the panic, the trapped breath, all of it deepens the film's suffocating tone. But fact number 8. Simone Signoret's most iconic moment is filmed while she is ill. Simone Signoret delivers one of the film's most restrained and devastating performances. But her famous interrogation room sequence hides a secret. She films it while running a high fever. She refuses to postpone. Melville refuses to adjust lighting or pacing. Not convenience, but commitment. Not comfort, but conviction. Her exhaustion becomes part of the character. You can see the tremble in her hands. You can see her eyelids fight to stay open. Crew members report she sits alone between takes, speaking barely above a whisper to preserve strength. Her illness intensifies the emotional weight of the scene. She looks worn, fragile, yet unbroken. Exactly what Melville wants. Her authentic weakness elevates the performance into something mythic. What audiences interpret as masterful restraint is actually a real battle against her own body. The scene becomes a testament to both Signoret's discipline and the brutal demands of the production's realism. Fact number 7. Melville secretly manipulates weather conditions to control actor emotions. Army of Shadows feels perpetually cold and windswept because Melville makes sure the actors remain unsettled. Whenever weather forecasts predict mild temperature, he delays outdoor shooting. He wants overcast skies, wind that cuts skin, air that drains color. When natural cold fails, he orders industrial fans positioned just off-camera blasting bitter wind into the actors' faces. Some actors complain about tearing eyes and stinging cheeks, but Melville pushes harder. Not comfort, but disruption. Not steadiness, but instability. The goal is emotional authenticity. Melville believes fear and exhaustion register in micro-expressions that cannot be faked. The result is a production that mirrors the moral climate of the resistance, harsh, unpredictable, stripped of comfort. What audiences never realize is that the bleak physicality of the film is engineered with precision. Every gust of wind, every trembling breath, every hunched shoulder is a crafted emotional weapon. Fact number 6. A controversial cutscene shows the resistance turning on civilians. Few people know that Melville films a highly controversial sequence depicting the resistance mistakenly executing a suspected informant who is later proven innocent. The scene is shot in stark silence using long takes and no music. It feels like an ethical wound. But when shown in early dailies, the producers panic. They claim the French public is not ready to see resistance fighters as fallible. Not heroes, but haunted men. Not legends, but flawed survivors. Melville fights to keep the scene arguing that moral ambiguity defines real resistance history. But studio pressure wins. The footage is locked away and never included in the theatrical release. Only a handful of crew members ever see it projected. They describe it as devastating. One calls it the real heart of the film. What audiences miss is a moment that exposes the tragic consequences of fear and suspicion, a shadow that would have deepened the film's already brutal honesty. Fact number 5. The radio transmission scene uses real resistance codes. Melville wants absolute authenticity in the radio transmission sequence. He refuses invented jargon. Instead, he consults surviving members of the French resistance who provide genuine coded phrases once used to coordinate safe houses and weapons drops. These codes are woven directly into the screenplay. The result is uncanny. Actors struggle to memorize sentences that appear meaningless, yet hold hidden wartime significance. Not dialogue, but encryption. Not performance, but reenactment. The tension on set rises because Melville demands perfect timing. Every pause must match the rhythm of clandestine transmissions. Crew members report that the room becomes so quiet you can hear fabric shift. What audiences do not know is that some of these codes are still classified during production. Melville films them anyway, trusting that their emotional weight transcends secrecy. This scene resonates because it is not Hollywood interpretation. It is the ghost of real resistance communication flickering through 1969 celluloid. And fact number 4. The torture scene is filmed with unannounced camera rolls. Melville is obsessed with capturing unfiltered reactions. During the torture sequence, he keeps cameras rolling before actors expect the take to begin. No slate, no countdown, just silent observation. The actors think they are rehearsing. In reality, they are already inside the shot. This technique generates raw authenticity. When an actor flinches from a sudden prop movement, the reaction is genuine. When a hand trembles, it is not performed but lived. One crew member recalls that Melville whispers, "Do not warn them," to the camera operators. He wants fear to seep through the cast like cold water through stone. The footage is so disturbing that several frames are toned down in editing. Not censorship, but mercy. What audiences see as grim control is actually a delicate dance between psychological manipulation and artistic precision. The scene becomes one of the most quietly devastating depictions of torture ever filmed because it is built on surprise shock and real vulnerability. Fact number 3. A key character's final scene is rewritten after a real-life tragedy. One of the supporting actors loses a close family member during production. When he returns to set, his grief is heavy in the air. Melville watches him walk across the studio and sees that the sorrow is etched into his posture. The director quietly rewrites the character's final scene. Not stoicism, but collapse. Not closure, but open-ended ache. Instead of delivering a heroic final line, the character now sits silently absorbing the weight of betrayal and loss. Melville encourages the actor to bring whatever emotion remains inside him. No performance, just presence. The result is haunting. Crew members who witness the take say it feels like the entire room stops breathing. What audiences experience as profound melancholy is born from real-life mourning rippling directly into the fiction. It is one of the rare moments where cinema becomes a vessel for grief rather than a shield against it. Fact number 2. The film's bleak ending nearly causes its cancellation. When producers see Melville's rough cut, they fear the ending is too bleak for 1969 audiences. No triumph, no catharsis, not victory, but void. Executives pressure him to reshoot a more uplifting finale. One memo reportedly reads, "The public must leave with hope." Melville refuses. He argues that the resistance lived without guarantees or comfort, so the film must do the same. The standoff becomes intense. For several days, production stalls while negotiations erupt. Some believe the film will be canceled entirely. Cast members prepare statements in case distribution collapses. But Melville holds his ground and ultimately wins. The unflinching ending remains intact. What audiences feel as cold, haunting truth is the result of a creative battle fought with the same stubbornness that defines the characters themselves. It is a rare case where artistic integrity survives industry pressure and becomes the soul of the film's legacy. Fact number 1. The film is released in France but buried abroad for decades. Army of Shadows premieres in France to mixed reception. Some critics call it brilliant. Others accuse it of glorifying the resistance. But outside France, the film barely exists. Distribution companies consider it too political and too slow for international markets. Not misunderstood, but dismissed. As a result, the film becomes a ghost for nearly 40 years. It screens only in scattered retrospectives. Many cinema historians never see it. Even Melville fans assume it is a minor work. Everything changes when a restored print premieres in the early 2000s. Critics reevaluate it and call it a masterpiece. Some even declare it Melville's greatest achievement. What audiences think of as a long-respected classic is actually a resurrected film, a lost giant that returns from obscurity. Its late recognition becomes one of the most dramatic critical reversals in film history. Bonus fact: the original negative almost disappears forever. The most astonishing secret is this. The original camera negative is nearly destroyed in a storage disaster in the 1980s. A facility leak saturates several reels, including portions of the interrogation sequences. Archivists scramble to dry the material using newly developed preservation methods. For days, they work without sleep. If the rescue fails, Army of Shadows becomes incomplete, permanently scarred, or lost entirely. Not preservation, but resurrection. The restored version audiences celebrate today exists only because a handful of technicians refuse to give up. Their work saves not just a film, but the final memory of Melville's worldview. Without their intervention, Army of Shadows would remain a whispered title instead of a reclaimed masterpiece. Army of Shadows begins as a wartime thriller, but becomes a meditation on secrecy, sacrifice, and the quiet cost of resistance. Its legacy emerges not from early praise, but from survival in the shadows. If you enjoyed uncovering these hidden truths, subscribe and explore more cinematic secrets. And remember, in the world of Melville, nothing is simple, and every shadow hides a story.